Hi everyone, it's David from Automotive Press. I have a 2023 Acura MDX Type S, and what I want to do is actually compare this to upcoming Lexus TX, which no one knows about. So what I'm going to do is compare to see whether Lexus is up to the challenge and are able to come up with something as good as Acura MDX Type S. So let's talk about this really exciting comparison. Let's go. Welcome back. The reason why this is a very interesting conversation is because the Acura MDX as a three-row luxury SUV is currently the benchmark in this price range. And Lexus is falling behind because of nothing that competes directly with this. You can argue that the Lexus GX competes with this, but that's a body on frame with a very outdated design due for a change next year. We can also say that existing RX can compete with this, but that is not a proper three-row SUV. So for the longest time, Lexus customers and dealers have been waiting for Lexus to introduce a proper three-row SUV to compete with the likes of Acura MDX. The big question, of course, is would they be able to design something that is as good or better than MDX, especially because Acura takes one step further with this Type S, which is a true high-performance version. Typically speaking, Lexus is very conservative, and most likely the first iteration or the first generation of the new Lexus TX will not have a high-performance variant, so that alone makes it a one step behind the Acura MDX. Plus the fact that Acura MDX has been around for a couple of years now, so they had most of the bugs taken out of, and it's truly well made. So let me use the Acura MDX Type S here as the benchmark and the reference point as I continue to talk about the TX, which no one really knows much about. It is going to be based on Toyota Highlander platform, but the bigger version of it, because Toyota is introducing a model called the Grand Highlander, and then Lexus will introduce their version of that, which is going to be called Lexus TX. Most likely, the Lexus TX will have a 2.4-liter turbocharged engine with or without hybrid, maybe even the plug-in hybrid version as well, and therefore they will have a very different style and approach to Acura, which is still offering V6 engine, and there's no hybrid in fact in the Acura. So the two brands are taking a very different approach. Now let's start with exterior and do some comparison. The Acura MDX is proven design, a lot of people like it. It's not a huge revolutionary change from the previous generation, and that is because this is the best-selling three-row SUV in the luxury car market in North America, so they probably didn't want to make too many changes. You've got the really bold Acura design here with a huge logo, and then also this kind of hatched design in the front, which is gloss black. Beautiful design with a jewel eye headlight. I think the whole front end is really well done, whereas the Lexus TX will likely carry the design trait from the recently introduced Lexus RX. And I'm not too crazy about that design with a semi-grille mixed in with a body embedded grille. And I'm not sure if that's the best design direction for Lexus, but most likely that's the way they're going to go. So I'm going to make a bit of assumption here and say that the Acura MDX will likely look a little bit more traditional, but in my opinion, better looking than what Lexus might come up with in terms of TX. Now, since none of us have seen the TX, who knows, there could be a big surprise and the grille could be very different, but that is some of the things I'm thinking about. Let's keep on moving here in terms of body profile. Again, Acura kept a very similar profile to the previous generation one, and they kept this C-pillar design that's unique to MDX that goes up in terms of incline, and it's a very clean but somewhat traditional looking three-row SUV. For Lexus TX, because it's based on the Highlander platform and Lexus tends to be very conservative with the design, I think this entire side profile will look very similar. In fact, most of the SUVs out there look quite similar between all the different models. So which one will look better in terms of side profile? A little bit hard to say. I'm going to assume once again, if you like more of a traditional look, you'll like the MDX, and maybe Lexus TX will take some design challenge and do something a bit different, but it's a little hard to say. Most likely it's going to have the floating roof that the Lexus RX has. If that's the case, it will look different from the MDX. In terms of rear design, this is a classic Acura design. Nothing really phenomenal in terms of look and feel, but for the buyer who likes this kind of three-row SUV, they probably like this look. It's classic, it's very proven over time. For the Lexus TX, I can almost guarantee it's going to be the full width tail lamp from side to side. That's the direction they're going. And instead of having a logo, Lexus will have the word Lexus spelled out on the actual body of the back. So those are some of the things we can predict. So I'm going to assume that the rear will look very similar to the new Lexus RX and the new Lexus NX, because all of them have a very strong design theme that is similar to each other. So do you like this kind of traditional design better, or do you want more of a Lexus style that goes from left to right? That's something you have to decide. In terms of wheel design, this is a blacked out sporty looking wheels because this is Type S. In the Lexus, most likely you'll be a bit more conservative in terms of design. But really the most important question is, would Lexus actually introduce a high performance version of the TX in the same format as Acura has done with MDX? I don't think they'll do that right off the bat, but I'm sure that they will have the F Sport version of the Lexus TX, which is not a true high performance variant, but it will have a sporty look and feel. And perhaps a year or year and a half down the road, they might introduce a much more potent version that is worthy of the name F. So could there be Lexus TXF? That's a good one. Probably not in the first few years, but it'll be really wonderful and delightful if Lexus can take the extra step and introduce a high performance version. Having said all that, I do think Acura will have a headway in terms of performance and sportiness for a while. So if you really want something sporty and fun to drive, you'll likely want to stick with the Acura MDX. But if you want something conservative and very Lexus in terms of style, you might want to wait for the TX. Now let's take a look at the inside and do a quick comparison and prediction, and let's see how the TX might compare against this Acura MDX. So now I'm inside the Acura MDX Type S, which has a gorgeous interior, but there are a number of things that I'm not too crazy about. As I mentioned in previous videos, I really don't understand why Acura did not put the touch panel for the infotainment system and still forcing us to use little touchpad over here, which is really awkward because this thing doesn't function like a normal touchpad. It's what they call point and click sort of thing. So wherever you point is where you want to click, but it's extremely awkward, and I know that you'll get used to it, like most Acura owners have done. But nothing can beat an actual touch panel where you just reach out and deal with navigation and the buttons. But this is also too far. So I am 100% sure that when the Lexus introduces a TX sometime next year, probably mid-year in 2023, you'll be a large 14-inch display like what you find in the Lexus NX, and it will be a touch panel for sure. Rest of the interior for Acura is it's actually really nice. It's very sporty. None of us like this piano black because it's so shiny and also gets dusty and fingerprint, but they did try to make this less prone to fingerprints, and I can tell that it's improved. Still, it doesn't look quite right for me. So I think in the TX, they might have a more of a cleaner design, more of a classic Lexus design, so they won't have so much piano black. So that could be an advantage for Lexus TX. I am glad that Acura has kept all the buttons for the most part in terms of the radio, the HVAC and air conditioning, although I do find it frustrating in that there are too many buttons because there are buttons for shifting transmissions as well as a button for radio, but somehow the HVAC control is not a turn knob, but it's up and down motion and so forth. So until you get used to this, I think it's a bit awkward. And also the charging port, you have to pop it out, and that way the wire will be hanging off here as opposed to getting this embedded inside. So I'm going to make my prediction that for the interior, Lexus might be more conservative in their design, but their overall design I think will be cleaner, more classic, and hopefully if they kept the buttons, it'll be a better system than the one in Acura MDX. Mostly, once again, because of the lack of touch panel in the infotainment system. Steering wheel is nice and sporty looking because this is a Type S, good grip, and I really like the perforated steering. But lately, Lexus have had a really good steering design with a small hub and a very sporty feel and a smaller rim as well. So I'm not sure which steering wheel will look better or will be more user-friendly, but I'm going to say they're going to be competitive. Finally, to summarize the interior, the seats are very comfortable on MDX. It has always been comfortable. It's very wide and has lots of controls. Sometimes the Lexus seats are a little bit soft and cushy, and so maybe the Acura MDX will feel sportier in terms of design. What about the stereo system? I'm going to say that they're comparable because traditionally speaking, Acura stereo and Lexus stereo have been very similar in terms of performance. Their Mark Levinson is about the same as the Acura version right here. So who knows if one will be better than the other, but we can only find out when that comes out. Practicality wise, this thing is very roomy for both the second row and the third row. Lots of cargo space as well. Whether or not the Lexus TX will be as practical is yet to be seen. It is going to be based on a Highlander platform but stretched out, because Toyota will also have a version called a Grand Highlander, and both of them will be built in Princeton, Indiana factory. We do know that. And safety wise, they did say that there will be some advanced parking system available on those models, which we don't have yet on Acura. So perhaps Lexus will have a bit of a leadway in terms of safety features. So those are some of the interior summary and conclusion I have comparing the MDX to the upcoming Lexus TX. Now let's take it for a drive and make some prediction as to what the Lexus might feel compared to Acura MDX. So now I'm driving the Acura MDX Type S, and in this price range, in the three-row luxury market, there's nothing that comes close to the handling capability of this vehicle. This one has a sharp, agile feel, it's flat around the corners, and it has a pretty good feedback from the road. Maybe not quite as good as something like an Audi Q8 or a Porsche Cayenne, but pretty close. In fact, I would say among the Asian models, even compared to, let's say, Genesis models, this one has the sharpest feel and the best road feel. For sure, if you love driving and you still need a big SUV, this is the one you have to get because it's a benchmark now. So the big question is, would the Lexus TX be as capable and as fun to drive as this model? Once again, since none of us have seen or driven the TX, it's a bit hard to predict, but based on history of how Lexus designs and engineers a vehicle, I doubt very much they're going to match the capability of the MDX, especially this one Type S, because traditionally they're more conservative in terms of their approach to driving, and most of the Lexus are very smooth and quiet and refined, but not as fun to drive as models from Acura. So my prediction is that the MDX will remain as the benchmark among three-row luxury SUVs, even compared to some of the German models from Audi and BMW and Mercedes. And certainly the Lexus will not be able to come up with something that would be as fun to drive as the Type S, because I doubt very much they're going to introduce anything close to this in the first iteration of the TX model. So we can expect TX to have multiple different trim levels, and maybe the F Sport model, which is usually just a cosmetic change without too much of a power upgrades. So whatever the Lexus come up with in the form of a TX, you'll likely be very smooth and quiet, but probably just won't be as fun to drive as MDX. The only complaint I have about the MDX is the suspension, both in terms of the base model as well as this Type S. Their calibration is not quite right because it's very smooth on a smooth pavement, but as soon as you get into bumpy road, it loses composure a bit, partly due to the selection of the tires. There are Continental tires on this particular model, and maybe it's not the best choice. They probably should have chosen something from a Michelin lineup, which would have been a better ride control. But other than that, the brakes, the steering feel, cornering ability, and handling are all top-notch and still the benchmark. So kudos to Acura for designing something that's as sporty as this MDX Type S. The engine, by the way, also very smooth and refined, and I love the V6 engine in this Type S. It's a well-designed, high output, high revving engine that is still refined and extremely smooth. For better or worse, Lexus will likely have a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, and even though that engine with or without hybrid will probably match the horsepower and the torque rating of this MDX, is not going to feel the same, and that would be one big disappointment as Lexus and Toyota continues to get rid of V6 and V8 engines and move into turbocharged 4. And while they are advanced in terms of technology, I don't think it's going to feel the same. Where Lexus will have an advantage is the fact that they will have a hybrid model and maybe even a plug-in hybrid for TX. So they will have much better fuel efficiency than this MDX, which remains as gasoline only and V6 only. So there's nothing that is super fuel efficient in the MDX lineup, and that is where the big advantage will be for Lexus. But in terms of the feel of the driving, especially the engine character, I really think that Lexus TX will not be able to match the overall feel of the MDX, including this Type S, just because this is a V6 engine model with an immense amount of power and a really smooth torque curve compared to a high revving turbocharged 4-cylinder engine that will power the Lexus TX. It'll be very interesting to see a side-by-side comparison, and to do a back-to-back driving of the two models once the Lexus TX comes out, which should be sometime in the summer of next year. There's no official confirmation from Lexus yet, but hopefully we'll see a preview version of the TX perhaps in the spring of next year, and we get to drive one about a year from today. So those are some of the comparison comments I have between the Acura MDX and the Lexus TX, and at some point, hopefully, Lexus TX will introduce a high-performance variant of that model to compete with this Type S. But until then, Acura has a monopoly in terms of offering a fun-to-drive, high-performance SUV because there's nothing quite like it, especially in this price range. So I hope you enjoyed the video comparing the 2023 Acura MDX Type S to the upcoming 2024 Lexus TX. If you can make some comments, give me a thumbs up, and maybe subscribe, that would be appreciated. But until next video, I'm going to sign off for now. Thank you so much.